Tonight is the NBA draft lottery. Obviously, the biggest prize is Francis Victor Wembanyama. But I like to think I won the lottery because I get to talk to my main man, Justin Tinsley from Andscape, esteemed author, thought leader, broadcast journalist, the voice of the people, just all around phenomenal creative guy. One of my favorite people in this business. I like to think of him as my little brother, but you got more gray in your beard than I do, which is to say nothing of your meteoric rise. So I'm looking up to you these days, my brother. It's good to see you, JT.
Oh, come on, man. You know the love is always mutual over here. I owe you a lot in my career. So to be on your show talking to you, it definitely a career highlight for me for sure.
Well, I appreciate that more than I could express, man. But that kind of brings me to where I want to go with you, man, because um, mentorship and relationship and good counsel is extremely important in our business, in life, in any walk of life. And I would say the
Yeah.
best thing, going back to the draft lottery, the best thing that I saw yesterday, I got to be honest with you, I haven't watched a lot of Scoot Henderson highlights. I haven't watched him play. I know what I've read. I know what
Yeah.
people say. He's the quote unquote consolation prize, the G League Ignite point guard. But it was announced yesterday, Monday, that Scoot Henderson and Steph Curry have formed a mentorship and strategic alliance. Henderson will have the support and mentorship of Curry as he looks to take ownership of his off court business, enterprise, and brand. Like I said, man, I'm no scout. Haven't watched a lot of Scoot Henderson, but that's enough for me right there. Him aligning
Yeah.
himself with Steph Curry, having the wherewithal, the awareness to align himself with somebody like Steph Curry for on and off court mentorship is everything I need to know if I'm a franchise taking him second in this upcoming NBA draft, knowing that I can trust this young man to do the right things off the court.
No, for sure, man. Like that, I think that's such a beautiful example of like giving back and pushing forward, you know? Like I don't think he's going to be a consolation prize. I've seen him play a few
Right.
games. I'm not a Scoot
That's why I put
Henderson
that in
expert
quotes,
by
by the
any
way.
means.
That's why I put that in
Yeah,
quotes.
I've seen him
Consolation
for a
prize
few
is the same way
games.
Kevin Durant once was a consolation
Yeah,
prize. Yeah.
look, we've seen some really good consolation prizes in the NBA over the course of
Yeah.
his history. But I think that's
Yeah.
a beautiful example of just like leadership and brotherhood and just creating community as well. You know, so I believe that's a beautiful story, man.
Yeah. I mean, and his story is interesting in general. I mean, he's also,
Hmm.
speaking of building community, um, he and his parents, Chris and Crystal, I beg your pardon, they opened a gym called Next Play 360 that's helped provide food, outreach, and leadership to the surrounding community in Marietta, Georgia. So, and his sister Crystal Moochie Henderson is a Georgia State commit. So Steph is also going to help her prepare for the
That's
next
awesome.
level. Yeah, so yeah, and again, the consolation prize thing. I'm sure he's a really, really good player. It's just I don't know
Yeah.
that people are calling him generational. Generational the way that they are Wemby. So certainly meant no slight by that. But bottom line is, it's like when you're taking a guy that young, that early, it's nice to
Yep.
know that he got a good head on his shoulders.
Yeah, you need that now more than ever. Obviously, with the conversations going around, this Ja Morant situation, it it's not just about basketball. And in a lot of cases, man, basketball is kind of low on the list. They know you can hoop, but they want
Right.
to know, are you prepared when you accept this lifestyle? Because your lifestyle is about to change and it's about to change dramatically, especially if you're, like a high draft pick or somebody with a lot of hype around them. So this is how you build your portfolio, your resume, your character in the league to, like you said earlier on, to let people know, like, yeah, I'm coming here to ball, but I'm also coming here like I'm gonna treat this like the business that it is. And
Right.
I'm not gonna mess up my money because if I mess up my money, then I'm messing up your money. So I think this
Right.
is yeah, this is really thoughtful on Steph and Scoot's part because you got to be able to accept the help too, and then you got to want to be able to give the help from a good place at that. And it just seems like Steph and Scoot are on that same wavelength. And I hope we can see more of this and more of this in the future, not just in the NBA, but in the WNBA. It's honestly, man, across leagues, that would be
Yeah.
phenomenal. That's phenomenal because all
Yes.
this stuff is a business, bro. You've been in the
Yes.
business for how long? I've been in the business for how long? And in a lot of cases, in every conversation we've ever had around sports, it always comes back to the money. And it
Yeah.
always comes back to the opportunities that are provided once you use this platform in the way that you're supposed to use it. So, yeah, consolation prize, like you said, with the air quotes, but it you want to get somebody who can live with the moment and not be overwhelmed by it.
Man, you want to talk about same wavelength? That's twice you have like beat me to it. Cause I was first, I'll tell you the second one in a second as we pivot. But I was gonna say, man, like it says something about Scoot that he's open to receiving guidance. Now you might say,
Mm-hmm.
well, duh, it's Steph Curry.
Mm-hmm.
Who wouldn't want to be connected to Steph Curry? It's like a lot of these young dudes ain't trying to hear it. Unfortunately, they think they got it all figured out, or they're only trying to stay connected to the people that they've been with from day one, with their day ones, or also
Mm-hmm.
too, it's like being receptive to somebody that's going to tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Talking about giving it and coming from the right place. I don't think Steph
Yeah.
Curry would align himself with somebody who wasn't like-minded, who wasn't about the right kind of values, and who could bring embarrassment to his brand. Like if you're Steph Curry, you don't have much to gain beyond just the fulfillment of giving back, of reaching back and helping the next generation, which is
Yeah.
significant. But you have a lot to lose if you align yourself with the wrong person who makes you look bad. So if you're Steph
Yeah.
Curry, he obviously clearly vetted Scoot Henderson, vetted his family, vetted this kid and what he's about to say, you know what, here's somebody who I want to align my brand with and pour into. Because somebody told me a long time ago, JT, knowledge is the only thing that you can give and not lose. You can give your time
Yeah.
the way you're giving me right now. You can give your
Yep.
money, but you can give knowledge and never lose it. There's no harm in passing it on. And so for Steph to do
Yep.
this says a lot about Steph, which we know, but not all people would be inclined to accept mentorship and being in a strategic alliance with somebody that's going to keep it a buck with them at all times. It would
For
just be
sure.
about making the bucks, not somebody keeping it in the buck with them.
No, no, that's for sure, man. And one of the, you know how it is when you're younger, you got your pride, and like you said, you think you have the world figured out, but now more than ever, we see how the world changes so quickly around us. And somebody told me something recently. It was like every like 3 to 5 years, excuse me, every 3 to 5 years, I do like a self-assessment check. You know, like, all right,
Mm,
what do I want to do in these next 3 to 5 years? What do I want to do then? What do I want to do? Um, and how do I get there? And honestly, within this business, you want to be able to network from, an honest and a well-intentioned place. So sometimes it's hard to ask for that help, and I get that, but the guys that do, the young women that do, that understand is like, yo, where do I want to go and how can I get there and make some real change off of that? Like I
yeah.
can't be saying I want to do this, that, and the third if I'm not preparing myself for it now. And with this Scoop and Steph thing, I think that's Scoop seeing Steph. And obviously, yes, of course it's Steph Curry. But yo, I got a chance to align myself with the greatest shooter of all time, the guy who quite literally changed the game of basketball. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's not even a first ballot Hall of Famer. Dude is already in the Hall of Fame, but he's still hooping right now. And if you
Yeah.
got a chance to
Yeah.
learn and soak up game under that, man, it may not get and excuse me, it may not guarantee you averaging 30 a game, but
Right.
it definitely can guarantee you to set yourself up in other ways and like even beyond basketball.
100%. And the second way you beat me to it was I did intend to juxtapose it with Ja. Because
Hmm.
it's been it seems like it was just yesterday. It's been 4 years since Ja Morant was the quote unquote consolation prize of the 2019
Yeah.
draft behind Zion Williamson. Um, and you couldn't have told me that we'd be here now talking about Ja Morant the way we're talking about Ja Morant right now. And JT, like I said, man, you're one of the most thoughtful dudes I know. Not only do you have a good head, you have a good heart. I'd like to think that I do as well, and I've tried to approach over the course of my career difficult conversations, real life conversations from a place of compassion. But I'm fresh out of that right now for Ja. And maybe there is something going on in his life. Maybe there is an issue, an underlying issue. But I have a hard time buying the idea that he was pushing about stress and anxiety um, the first time he got caught on IG with a gun. I just think he's suffering from a severe case of stupidity. And I'm not saying he is stupid. He's doing stupid things.
Yeah.
And I don't find myself with a lot of sympathy because this just seems like the behavior. This is just clown behavior. This is just immature clown behavior and somebody that needs to grow up. I hope and wish the best for this young man. I really do. But I don't know that. I don't know that the grace is good for him. The grace that he was getting from some places after the first incident, or the way that the incident with his folks in the Indiana Pacers and the alleged, which seems a lot more believable now, but the alleged laser pointing out of a car incident that the league investigated, or the Foot Locker incident, or the kid that claims he got beat up at his house. All of this stuff taken in totality feels like we're going about it all wrong. By we, I mean everybody. I mean the NBA. I mean the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, his apologists. I mean the media. I mean everybody's going about it all wrong when it comes to getting this kid's attention. Am I making sense?
No, it makes total sense, man. And this is such like a really complex topic to talk about because there's so many ways to look at it and so many entry points. And
Yeah.
I look at it now like his goodwill, his credibility, or whatever was left of it has been shot. You know, like, and what's really is self-destruction, man. And that's really hard to look at and see it because then kind of like you're complicit to it. You know, like, oh man, we see this dude. And again, I don't know what he's dealing with in his personal life. I won't even begin to speculate that. But I know whatever it is causing his decision making to be horrible. It's in that decision making being horrible, it's felt in so many different ways, Mike. Like, of course, you got it from, oh man, what's the future of the Memphis Grizzlies look like? And then it's like, oh man, what's the future of like Ja in Memphis look like? And then you realize just how much money he's standing to lose because of all of
He's
this.
already lost 40.
He's already lost 40
million by not making an All-NBA team.
He's already lost 40.
If that don't get your attention, I don't know what does.
He's already lost 40 because he didn't make the All-NBA this year. He's not going to make it again next year because he's likely going to be suspended at least 30 games. And then you realize that suspension is without pay. So that new contract that was that is kicking in next year, that complicates that. And then you just got the whole, like, you got to look yourself in the mirror as a man and see like, yo, I am in a very rare position. I have a chance to change my family's life for generations. And I am out here posing with a gun on the internet. Now, and what scares me for Ja too is, man, like, it's people who sit around on the internet all day looking for videos like this and seeing it. Oh man, that's an NBA player doing that. There was this old barber one time, Mike, that told me this saying, bro, and he was talking to another young cat that was in the barbershop, and I was getting my haircut, but he was talking about a gun that he owned, and he was like, yeah, I take it everywhere with me. And the barber told him, he was like, don't go waving that gun around if you're not prepared for all the greetings that come with it. By that, I mean, like,
real.
Don't go inviting energy that you really don't want any parts of. And with this this conversation around guns in America, and obviously we know the really, really violent and tragic and flawed history of the relationship with, Black people, America, and guns, then you bring in that situation, and then you just bring it into, like, as you just said, like, you're not stupid, but you're making some really foolish decisions right now, Ja. And before all of this, bro, I'll say this. I was talking with somebody recently, and they was like, "Oh yeah, it's kind of like how like the media was treating Iverson during his day." I was like, "Nah, that's not really the case, because
Yeah.
if you go back with Iverson all the way back to the bowling alley incident, there was always racially charged conversations around Allen Iverson. There was always like this really polarizing conversation around him. With Ja, he came into the league pretty much. I mean, yeah, I guess he was seen as the consolation prize behind Zion, but he was pretty much beloved from day one. Like
Oh,
we
very, very
we saw
quickly,
this
it was
dude
like, is he the better
very
player?
quickly. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
like they
quickly.
might have
Like,
got the
yo,
better
this dude
player.
is the
Yeah,
future.
certainly
This
the more
dude is the
available.
future, bro. So
Yeah,
everybody was rooting for him. Everybody is
correct,
rooting for him, which is to
correct.
say, like, to see like these events and accusations happen one by one by one. It's like, bro, you have such a rare opportunity. We just got to get you on the path that you need to be on, because otherwise, like you keep going down this path, you'll be out the league before you know it. And I don't want to
Yeah,
talk about Ja Morant as one of the greatest what ifs in NBA history. That
right.
would
As a
be unfair
cautionary
to a lot
tale.
of people, most importantly, Ja Morant.
Well, the Iverson comparison is also flawed for me in terms of coverage because it's like, see, this is unprecedented because these
Yeah,
are self-inflicted wounds for real, for
yeah,
real. He is taking
yeah.
that proverbial gun and shooting himself in the foot because it's not as though he was pulled over and
Nope.
his gun wasn't registered or somebody else's gun was in the car or he brought a gun through the airport. Okay, my
Yep.
man is on IG Live. Like, so there's the gun
Yeah.
conversation and America's fascination with guns, and I say this as a gun owner, multiple guns. America's fascination with guns and the gun violence that consumes this country. But then there's just also this look at me stuff. And
Yeah.
I mean, like, why do you feel like I'm laughing because some of the memes are crazy. It's like, why every time, why must you broadcast whatever you're doing, and why does what you're doing have to include a gun as if it's a, I'd rather you throw up your watches, throw up your chains, do something. If you want to make a rap video, just make it without guns. Like you don't have to flash a gun. Because I said this the other day, you flash a gun, or in some cases brandish a gun, you flash a gun out of insecurity, whereas you're supposed to be carrying a gun for security. Nobody,
Hmm.
nobody would blame him for carrying, him or his people. That's fine. I carry. That's fine. But you're not intimidating anybody, and you're not impressing anybody by flaunting
Yeah.
that weapon. A lot of people got guns, bro. That's the problem with America. Everybody got them. You ain't got nothing, nobody
Right.
else. You have a lot of things that other people don't have and wish they have. A gun ain't one of them. You like everybody else with a gun. And so to sit there flashing it on camera is such a self-inflicted wound, and just in an unprecedented way. This isn't a bowling
Yeah.
alley fight. This isn't, he
Yeah.
hasn't even been arrested. He hasn't broken any laws, but he has violated the code. He has violated the policies of the NBA, of what is standard superstar decorum. And I just wonder, going back to the Scoot Henderson conversation, who does he
Hmm.
have in his ear that can grab him by his ear or grab him by the collar and say, bruh, what are you doing? Because all the talk about, and the other difference is, this isn't, he bringing his people with him and they're bringing him down. Like, no, it seems like his boys might be the only one with sense, because on the latest video, his boy has
Yeah.
sense enough to turn the camera away from him. Ja
Hmm.
is the one that you can't take nowhere. Ja's the one
Yeah.
that keep getting everybody else in trouble.
And that's the thing. You ask, where's his mentorship coming from? It goes back to the previous part of our conversation. You got to be willing to accept that mentorship too. The
Yeah.
only thing is, you don't want to accept it too late,
Hmm.
and these you hit the nail on the head with it. Like, these are self-inflicted wounds. There is nobody to blame but Ja Morant himself. Yes, we can get into the friends conversation, but as you said, like, he's been the culprit in two of these videos, and it's looking like he
Right.
is
Ain't
the
nobody ain't
friend.
nobody put the gun in his hand.
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
And the thing, you riding around on IG Live with that gun again, that's just creating energy that you really don't want around you. Like, John Morant, you're not trying to get into a drive-by or a gunfight.
No, man. Your real name
Shoot.
is Clarence. Come on, your real name's Clarence.
And Clarence's parents have a real good marriage. Um, but no, man, it's just like we like Ja Morant. We all want to see him win, which is why these self-inflicted wounds are so frustrating and honestly
Right.
heartbreaking to watch, because you know how much that young man has on his plate. And honestly, that plate ain't even half full yet in terms of what he could ultimately bring to the table. But this impacts so many different parts of his life, most of which he'll probably never speak on. But when you're the one that's responsible for, taking care of the people you want to take care of, in particular, like your daughter, let's just say your daughter or your son,
Yeah.
your children, like, you don't want to do anything that could mess up their life, because you'll never really forgive yourself for that, because you're put here to protect them. You're put here to make the best decisions possible.
Right.
Yes, we're all humans. We're all going to make mistakes, but you can't make mistakes like this, because these mistakes are so easily preventable. And how are they preventable? Just don't go on IG Live, or just don't put a gun up in a video. Like that
Right.
the
Nobody
solution
says you
is
can't
that simple.
carry. No, I haven't
Exactly.
heard anybody say that you can't legally own and carry a
No,
firearm.
there
I
is
mean, I
nothing
would not hip.
wrong.
I would not. I live in that glass house. I'm not gonna throw that brick. I'm not gonna
Right.
judge that. But if you've already gotten in trouble one time and gotten off lightly, why would you do it again? Like, it's almost like that's why do you have this habit? But again, it's not just the IG thing for me, which is silly
Mm-hmm.
and superficial. JT, I've struggled over the years whenever there's a conversation about suspension and punishment,
Yeah.
because I don't know what the right number is. I never know what the right number is,
Me
because
neither.
you
Yeah.
know, hey, this guy gets X amount of games for hitting a woman, or this guy gets X amount of games for sexual assault, or what have you. So, like, well, when those games are up, is he a changed person? Does that undo what he did? Like crime and punishment, I've always struggled with when it comes
Yeah.
to how many games somebody should miss. So you mentioned 30 earlier. I've heard significant. People have thrown out half the season. There are players who have missed entire seasons due to injury.
Yep.
I feel like Zion's done that. I know
Yeah.
Blake Griffin missed his rookie season.
Embiid.
Greg Oden, Embiid.
Yep.
This should be an indefinite suspension, if not a season-long suspension. And that's not me trying to put a number with this latest transgression. Let me explain why I say this. And I'm not trying to like drop the hammer on him for being an idiot on IG.
Yeah.
To me, this should be viewed no differently than an injury that somebody. I mean, we're in an era of load maintenance, right? And taking
Mm-hmm.
the long view. When you combine just the fact that he seems to always have a gun with him, seems to think it's an accessory and a toy that he can flash and show off. So he's quick to pull it out, seems like, right? Whatever happened with the kid at his house playing basketball, whatever happened at Foot Locker where, his mom or whoever called people to deal with the employee that was, fearful, allegedly. Whatever happened with the Pacers personnel with the laser pointed out of the car, allegedly. All of those things in totality tell me that we're this close to this being really tragic. Not just a cautionary tale, but really tragic if something's not done to curtail this behavior. It's like, you're a father now. It's like with my kids. Like, I'd like to think that they would do the right thing for the right reasons and I wouldn't have to threaten them. But sometimes the fear of consequences or something being taken away is the only thing that gets your attention. So suspension as a negative connotation, I prefer sabbatical. And I think this kid needs an extended sabbatical, indefinite at minimum, even if it takes the season to get his shit together. And whatever that takes.
Yeah.
Go in the corner, think about it, get whatever real help you need, embrace that help like we've been talking about, go through steps and a process, because we've seen people get suspended for a year for weed or for violating the drug policy and they have to take steps to get reinstated. Like, I feel like there needs to be steps, real steps, action item steps that need to be taken before he ever sees that Memphis Grizzlies facility again. I just don't think this should be 25 games in your back, because is that really going to curtail this behavior? I think it needs to be indefinite at minimum.
It's going to be really interesting. And I don't even know if interesting is the right word, but it'll be really telling what this decision from Silver ultimately says. I said 30. I keep hearing this significant suspension. And if it's indefinite, like you said, if he misses the entire season, that's because he lied to the commissioner's face the first time. Said, look, I'm going to get my stuff together. This ain't going to happen again. And he told the commissioner this won't happen again. In less than 2 months, it's happened again. So now, only in rare cases can you ever lie to your boss find out and nothing happens to you. Only in the very rarest of cases. Yeah. In this case, Ja Morant and David Silver are on an international platform. An international platform. They show NBA games all across the world.
Right.
Which means Ja Morant is known all across the world. Mm-hmm. And when you're an employee of an organization like that, and they tell you, look, don't do this again. We're going to give you these 8 games and we're going to pray that you figure this out.
Retroactively.
But now it's like we messed up the first time with our decision. So now we got to double back on it. And so I say 30, but if it is the full season, which I would not be surprised, that will be one of the most definitive decisions in NBA history for sure.
Yeah. And it would be for his own good more than anything. Hey, man.
Yeah.
This has been great. Real quick before I let you go, I'm so proud of you and everything that you're doing, whether it's your amazing book that's over your shoulder. It was all a dream biggie in the world that made him. That was the last time I talked to you when that first dropped. Whether it's Around the Horn, the Daily, I'm just proud of your growth. Most important, I'm proud that you are a new father. And so I guess on the way out, man, because you piqued my interest, and we talked about this offline before, your every 3 to 5 years, your self-assessment. So 2 things. 1, when is the next one due? And 2, based off the last one, how are you doing? How are you doing right now?
Okay. So I think the next one would be when I'm 40, because I try to do it on those, those solid years, the 5 and the 10s. You know what I mean? So I did 30, I did 35. Obviously, I'm 37 now, so 3 more years, I'll do it in 2026 for that. So in terms of how I'm doing, it's crazy to go back and look at that type of stuff, because your mind changes so much every day. The experiences that you have, the goals that you want to attain, they change so often. And I've got a lot of stuff checked off, but there's so much stuff that I didn't have on there because I didn't, expect it, to happen too. So it's beautiful to watch my life blossom like that. Like at first, like I didn't know if we were gonna have kids. You know what I mean? I didn't know if we wanted them, but then something changed, and thankfully we were blessed with a little boy, and I didn't have having kids on my last list, but now it's beautiful. Yeah. I love it. I love it, man.
It was all a dream. It wasn't even a dream. It really beyond was. Your wildest dreams. I'm telling you.
Look, beyond
I'm telling you. Hey, JT, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you for the conversation. Let's do this again soon, all right?
Hey, man, we got to do it again soon. Thank you for having me, bro.
All right, my man. All right, that was my main man, Justin Tinsley. Read him in Andscape. Follow him on social media. I'm so proud of him. I can't say that enough. He just does incredible work, and I appreciate him chopping it up with me on a delicate and difficult subject that is Ja Morant. Speaking of delicate and difficult subjects, Luke Russert, son of the late Tim Russert, famed political journalist Tim Russert from Meet the Press fame, has a new book out, which I've been reading, I've been enjoying, and he's going to join my main man, Michael Smith, to talk about the book, talk about his journey, talk about grief, loss, and finding yourself and parenthood. I want to get some parenting advice from him, so you don't want to miss that. I guarantee you, whatever you're going through, whatever you're dealing with, whatever or whomever you've lost, his story will touch you. So on the other side of this break, we will talk to Luke Russert. Luke Russert, it is so good to see you. Congratulations on your memoir. Look for me there, Grieving My Father, Finding Myself, which is a New York Times bestseller. It's good to see you. I've been hearing you for the last several days. My entire household's been hearing you. I've been listening to your book. You obviously have a great voice, and it's been nice hearing you tell your story. I want to broadly start there with the title and ask you a question this way. So the title, Look for Me There. Where is Luke Russert right now on his life's journey? Where are you at this moment?
Oh, that's a good question, man. That's like an Oprah question. My goodness. Well, I'm a long way away from when I first met you, which was the PTI newsroom in 2005
Yeah.
when you were a 25-year-old hungry reporter getting on TV. And it was so cool to see someone near my own age. I was 19 years old. Uh,
Yeah.
I think where I am now is more so than anything at a place of peace as it pertains to losing my dad. And it was a very long, arduous journey to get there. And part of that was because I never even attempted to get on that journey. One of the things I write about in my book is when I left NBC in 2016 and I started traveling, it was only supposed to be 6 months to a year. And I was trying to figure out, okay, who am I independent of my last name? Who am I independent of my parents? Who am I independent of my hometown, the sort of Washington bubble I grew up in? And ultimately, what I found while I was writing the book is I was doing two things. Is I was trying to look for something, which was acceptance from my own father of not going to be just like him, but I was simultaneously running away from something. And that was
Mm.
processing grief and dealing with grief. Because if I ever really truly processed it, I think in my own mind, I
Mm-hmm.
thought, then dad's really gone. And I didn't
Yeah.
want to face that. So for a long time, I kind of like to look back at 22-year-old Luke, is how old I was when my father passed, and said, okay, stay around there. It's almost an arrested development because you don't want to process those feelings. But I was able to do that. Not everybody gets the opportunity to do that. I mean, I know I've heard from so many people now since this book has come out, which is, I never really faced the grief of losing a loved one because it was just too difficult. And I was like, I was there for many years. But once I was able to
Mm-hmm.
get through there, it brought me a real sense of peace. It's not closure, but it's peace.
Mm.
And some people learn how to live with it. And that's cool too. So long as you don't hurt yourself or others, you're doing a good job.
What's the difference for you? You say it's not you point out it's not closure, it's peace. What's the difference in your existence?
It's a very good question. So I think a lot of people, they hear closure and they think, okay, that means that my father is gone or mom is gone or my loved one is gone, and that's it. That chapter of my life is over. And that's not it. I think your loved ones are all around you. You just have to look for
Mm-hmm.
signs, and you also have to put yourself in that state. And I had a lot of people after my father passed that said, listen to your dad, listen to your dad. He's there. I never understood what
Mm.
that meant until I actually got off the hamster wheel, got away from work, and literally took time for myself, just having to wrestle with the voices in my own head. And when I did that, I realized you can get yourself into a place of, oh, what would dad be telling me right now? What would my brother be telling me right now? What would my mom be telling me right now if they're gone? And it's one of those things where I was able to get to that place and then come to this realization of they wouldn't want me to suffer. They wouldn't want me to be so
Mm-hmm.
sad and angry all the time. They would want me to
Mm-hmm.
be happy, just like I was when I was around them. And so get there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's different for everybody, but I was able to do it.
Let's talk about your dad, Tim Russert. He passed 2008, coming up on 15 years since his passing on Father's Day weekend. For the young people out there, or those who may not be, as plugged into the political world, um, let's give them an idea of the legend that was Tim Russert. How would you characterize his career?
He died at the top. And what I mean by that is, like, imagine somebody coming off their, fifth title MVP season, and they die the next day, and that was him. I mean, he had the number one rated Sunday morning political talk show, Meet the Press. He was on NBC all during the week, and if somebody wanted to run for president, they had to go on the show, which was nicknamed, quote unquote, the Russert primary. But I think more so than
Mm-hmm.
anything is, aside from his professional accolades and how good he was as a father, he felt a deep connection to people. My father grew up, he was the son of a garbage man. My grandfather worked two jobs as a garbage man and truck driver for over 40 years. So my father understood the value of hard work, but he never lost that connection to people. And that is, I think, what made him so beloved. I mean, it's amazing. 15 years later, I'll have young people who will say to me, I had no idea who your father was, but I just remember my parents would watch him every Sunday morning at the breakfast table. And if I was making noise, they would scream at me because I was interrupting Tim. So I think that's the sort of relationship that develops over time and over TV. But he was someone who I think really cared about the American experiment and what the value of democracy is in civic participation and the importance of bringing everybody into that. And I think that is something which, at least now, when you see how divisive our times are, that sense of civility and that you actually have to let people speak and understand people and connect with people there's a nostalgia for it.
So when your father passed, you had just graduated BC. You're 22 years old, and I've seen you on. I mean, you've done the morning shows. You know, you did Today, you did CBS this morning. You did Meet the Press with Chuck. I forget which appearance it was, but you were asked the question. I think it was Jake Tapper. You asked the question, "What would you tell your 22-year-old self?" Which was a very thoughtful question and answer. And if you feel free to repeat that. But I was actually curious, when you look back on that eulogy in front of world leaders and celebrities, in front of the entire world, it's like, how do you make sense of your ability to honor your father in that moment at such a young age on that world stage?
I look back at that kid, 22 years old, and I'm in awe sometimes. I go, I don't think I could do that now, even with the life experience I've had. And sometimes they talk about when a car falls on somebody and people develop that superhuman strength to pick it up and move it over. I think it's a case of that, which, he passed away and I immediately went into this mode of got to be strong for dad. I got to be strong for my family. I got to be strong for mom. And I sat back and wrote that eulogy. And, honestly, Michael, it's now just when I was writing the book, when it came out, I think it's really the first time that it clicked in my own mind of, man, I was 3 weeks out of graduating college. This kind of carefree, like, kid wanting to go to grad school, maybe a gap year, maybe do some social service. I didn't really know. I was figuring it out, but I was taking a few weeks for myself and then thrust into that role where Barack Obama and John McCain are in the pew looking at me. And that was sort of something where, as I write in the book, my biggest opportunity comes of that, because people in TV, they say that, they go, oh, this is a young guy. He can speak well to the camera. He can enunciate his words properly. We need more young people like that on television. We should follow the youth vote, etc. But it was one of those things where I look back on it, I'm like, I was dialed into something. I was in some sort of zone. And that is a place where I wish I could get back to whenever I could, but I think part of its circumstances bring you there.
How did you feel about your big break, your opportunity coming out of such a tragic occurrence?
I understood the pressures that were going to be involved. Obviously, you're going to get hit with nepotism. They're going to say you're nothing but your last name. You came out of this for this crazy reason. Your father passed away. You give a eulogy. You're just comfortable in front of all those folks. They want to help you out. But it was interesting, as I write in the book, I kind of saw it as, all right, here's your opportunity. Not quite 8 Mile, right? But in that sort of vein, here's your shot. Do you take it? And for me, it was a decision where my mom said, look, you really got to make this decision yourself. Nobody else can make this for you. And you have to own it. And so what I did is I went back, I go, okay, I want to do this, but I only want a year contract. I don't want multiple years. I want 1 year to see what I'm made of. And the first part was good. The middle of the first year was not good. And it wasn't until I got to Capitol Hill where I started to do the real work. I said, take me off of TV. I'm going to go behind the scenes and just report and gather, kind of like what you did in the locker rooms, in the ugly places where there's no appeal, right? In the concourse, in the parking lot, in the places where you get the real stories. And once I did that, and I saw there was still people that were being mean to me, I took that as a fuel. And that was, all right, I got to work doubly hard to prove them wrong. But it's interesting, Michael, with fathers and sons. I mean, I look back and you think of, all right, there's two journeys here. Some people want to outdo their dad. So that's like the Peyton Mannings of the world, right? Like, I'm going to be just like dad, but I'm going to be better. And then there's other people that go, man, I don't know. My dad's a legend. I'm just going to do the best that I can. And I think I was on that part. Yeah.
If I could digress just for a second, 'cause I know you're a big sports fan, and we're definitely going to talk about your favorite football team before we get you out of here. But as I was preparing for this conversation and reading your book, and then obviously I'm plugged into sports, my day job. I'm like, I look at Bronny James, I look at LeBron James, and it's like in the world of political journalism, your dad was LeBron. He was one of the goats, And here you are following in his footsteps, obviously a different set of circumstances. But I look at Bronny going to USC. His dad wants to play with him, has been outspoken about that. It's like, I don't know. I know you follow sports. Did you see that story and be like, man, I can kind of relate to that?
I root for all the sons of. So, like, I think it was a few years ago where Austin Rivers had that playoff game where he got his nose just bashed in and absolutely played out. And I wrote a tweet about it. I was like, well, damn. I mean, he only did that because of nepotism, right? Because Austin gets a lot of that. And some people they didn't get the sarcasm on it, but it's great to see, people that ball out like that. And Klay Thompson and Steph Curry have actually even talked about this. They're at another level, but for many years they were just dismissed, as soon as they got into the gym, saying, "Oh, you guys, you're scared because your dad, etc." So I think there's that fuel. I think with Bronny, I mean, I've been following him his entire career. I root for him. I think it'll be really interesting because at this next level, especially at USC, there's going to be so much pressure. And the only thing I would say to him is that you got a great team around you, it seems. You're grounded. But just remember, the Vipers are going to come at you from every side now, more so than they have been in high school. Because as soon as you turn 18, and that was one of the things that I thought, like, oh, I'll get into it. My father just passed away. People will be nice enough to me. No. The second they can take a shot at you, they will. So he's just got to be very conscientious of that someone's going to come for him at every moment.
I love how transparent you are when it comes to that, to nepotism, the charges of nepotism. And one of the things, this isn't really a question, Luke, as much as it is an observation from listening to the book. I appreciate how honest and how real you are about your privilege. Like you acknowledge it, but you're not ashamed of it. You recognize it, but you don't regret it. You don't feel, you strike a really nice balance where you're still very, very relatable, and your story is very relatable and universal, even though your circumstances are obviously not the norm. I really just appreciated the way you met the nepotism and privilege conversation head on, if that makes sense.
Well, I appreciate that. And now there's the term Nepo baby. And I joke,
especially in Hollywood,
especially in Hollywood. I was there from the beginning of it. But that was one of the things that I think my father used to always teach me was you're always loved, but you're never entitled. And I think if you go back to LeBron, I mean, that's one of the things it seems to be he teaches his kids. I mean, they work incredibly hard in the gym, which is incredibly nice to see. I just think people in the society now, one of the things we suffer from is a real lack of self-awareness, no matter where you are on the scale. And that's one of the things where in our social media and instant gratification world that we live in, people get these ideas of themselves that are really out there and wild. And I always like to say, you're an influencer with 400 followers. Okay, that's great, but it doesn't give you the right to be mean to somebody you shouldn't be mean to somebody at a restaurant, no matter who it is, but the 400 follower person, especially not. At least get up to Kylie Jenner numbers before you even think about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, so back to your career. And so you leave NBC in 2016, Emmy award-winning journalist in your own right. Very, very good. Not just Tim Russert's son, but very, very good. And you leave, first of all, great timing, by the way. We'll get back to 2016, but in 2023, have you ever looked back and said, man, I got out just at the right time? Because if I would have, could you imagine having to work in this current climate with the last president or even the first 4 years of this president?
I got a taste of it because I covered the last president on the campaign trail a little bit. But what was interesting for my career is because I went in 09, and I always say that when my dad passed, it was sort of the end of the era. And what I mean is the end of the era of the broadcast news in the morning, broadcast news at night, cable during the day, and the newspapers, and that's what drove the news cycle. And it was around 2010, 2011 when Twitter really picked up.
Yeah.
You started to
Yeah.
get news in your face 24/7, just punching you in the face. And that changed a lot. And I don't think politics has ever recovered from it. I was in a unique position to sort of see that anthropologically, right? Sort of being inside of it, knowing what the old system was like with dad, and then seeing how that really shifted overnight with politicians and journalists just going to this technology and grasping to it. But the one thing I tell people is you have no idea what the technology is going to do down the line. And now everything's on TikTok. There could be some other different app. And the politicians are always behind, but the extremists are always ahead. So they can take it and craft their own narratives. And unfortunately, I think that's where a lot of politicians live now, is they want to live in their own echo chamber because no one challenges them. It's really easy. They speak to their voters, and they only really try to go to the middle right around election time when they have to. The rest of the time, it's turn out the base, turn out the base, turn out the base. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with you. It's not that I'm not missing that, and
Yeah.
it's just like, you remember what it was like growing up. Like, okay, occasionally someone would say a bombastic thing, but most of the time it was let's work together because hey, there's money to be had for a bridge project. I want to get reelected. I'm going to need some swing voters, and now it's just nope, nope. And
Yeah.
how we've embraced sort of the worst elements of our culture, especially on the right, it's been quite sad.
I'm gonna get back on track in a minute. You're not missing it, but the country, the discourse, the discussion, the industry certainly still misses Tim Russert. I know you talk to him a lot, and you reflect on him a lot. Have you ever thought about, or do you have an idea of what he could have contributed to the conversation and the coverage in the last 15 years, or even just what he would say about where we are right now?
It's a very good question. I think first and foremost is he practiced civility, and that civility gave him a sense of respect on both sides. So people knew that when he was talking, it wasn't partisan. And some folks would take partisan shots at him, but for the most time, the vast majority of people trusted him, and he was very conscientious of that trust and always worked to try to honor that as it pertained to politics. I think if anything, the biggest changes that would have upset him were just how fragmented the landscape is now. And one thing which I look back on fondly is when he was doing Meet the Press, they had segments that were 24 minutes, 31 minutes, where you actually had the politician in the chair in front of you, not via satellite, not via Zoom, right, in front of you. And it was like a prize fight. And that's when the politician, there was enough time to get them on the record, show the differences where they were that day versus 3 or 4 years ago, 10 years ago, et cetera. And I think that's something that he would have fought to hold on to as long as possible. I mean, for a long time, there was a rule at Meet the Press where if you were on Meet the Press, you had to be in studio. And they would occasionally make a change and say, okay, well, the president's in Saudi Arabia today, we'll take him because he's
Right.
there. But once that went away and people realized they could just run out the clock, that was, I think, the end of his era. And it's hard to compare him. It's like sports. He kind of played without the 3-point line. You know what I mean? It's a different time.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. No, I mean the industry is a mess right now. I respect the bravery that it took to walk away from the world that you knew, the legacy that you were carrying, and a successful career. How did you work up the courage in 2016 to say, you know what, this is not for me. I don't know exactly what is for me, but it's not this. I'm going to go find out and travel the world and figure out who I am and what I want to be and what I want to do.
So I lost a friend at 27 and my father passed away at 58. So when I turned 30, I was conscientious of the light at the end of the tunnel. I used to think that was old. Now I'm 37. 30 is not old. I wish I was 30 again. You're young at 30. Enjoy 30. But
Yeah.
I was starting to feel those things. And then also just in my own life, as it pertained to work, I felt unfulfilled. And I felt anxiety around the position. Man, is this all I'm going to do? Is there anything out there that's bigger for me. And I've never really taken time by myself to think about who I am. And I kept having these feelings in 2015, and they would lead to really anxious moments where I would be on TV and I would feel like I was being strangled by my necktie, or I would fall against the wall because I was just so filled up with angst.
Yeah.
Almost having panic attacks. And so I started to think like, all right, something's off. I got to figure this out. And I had a chance encounter with House Speaker John Boehner, who I covered really aggressively at the time. And I think he sort of saw me and thought something was off. And he called me into his office and he's like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "Well, you invited me into your office. What do you mean, what am I doing here?" And he goes, "No, what are you doing on Capitol Hill?" He goes, "Time's a flat circle here. Washington's a flat circle. People go 50, 60, 70 years and they look up and go, man, what did I just do?" Because you're still young, you have an opportunity to get out and learn something else or feel something else. Just might be a good idea for you. And that was sort of the catalyst for me that, all right, these feelings that were in my head about everything not being whole, it's okay. Some people are actually noticing them. Go handle them, go deal with them, because nothing is worth white knuckling through something that is just making you miserable. And I wouldn't say I was miserable, but there are moments that were really difficult, and I wasn't handling them well.
Speaking of handling, that gives me a good entry point, I think, into something I want to share with you. I mentioned that you look for me there, Grieving My Father, Finding Myself is a New York Times bestseller. It's being received very well, not surprisingly. I imagine that it's done wonders for people struggling with grief or just who are on their own journeys for self-discovery. I'm blessed to not be able to relate to that experience. I still have my father. I still have my stepfather. I obviously, lost my grandparents, but my father is still with me. Luke, I actually read the book, though. The point I'm getting at is I read the book from the perspective of a father. And it really, really touched me. Because I guess timing, it's also not just what you read, but when you read it and where you are in your life when you're reading something or listening to it as a case where maybe. So I'm listening to your book, and my oldest daughter is a couple of days away from turning 17. She's got one foot out the door. My son just turned 15. And my youngest daughter's 10. And so I think a lot about, because father is my number one job. It's my favorite role. It's my favorite part of me. It's what I identify most as. So I'm doing a lot of reflecting anyway, independent of your book, about how can I be a better father? Because as the saying goes, the biggest mistake we make is believing that we have time. And you were 22 when you lost your dad. My oldest daughter's 17. My son's 15. It's like, it was moving to listen to you recount the last conversation with your dad when he was trying to hook up the Xbox in your dorm room. It's like, we don't know when that last conversation is. We don't know when that last encounter is going to be. We don't know the last time we're going to get to say I love you or the last thing we're going to do together. And so I try to just be more intentional about my time. I mean, I've always spent a lot of time. I can safely say, Luke, and thank you for indulging me, I can safely and confidently say that I haven't missed a lot because of work. I haven't missed a lot. And even when I'm home, I've made a conscious effort to be present. But I don't always succeed. I don't fear failure, Luke, but I do fear failing as a father or falling short as a father, because we get one shot at this. We get one shot, and we don't know how long it is. We don't know how long we have them. So what inspired me, I'm going to try to land the plane here. What inspired me and what touched me about your book is I said to myself, I want Savannah, Mason, and Maya to have that kind of reverence for me. I want them to feel that kind of connection for me. You've called your dad your best friend over and over. I want to be sure that my son looks at me as his best friend and looks fondly on whatever time we had. Sometimes I might lose my temper every now and then, or I might yell. I don't want those to be his memories at all. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that every conversation we have is one that maybe someday he writes about and tells his friends about, and so on and so forth. So, all right, I had to share that with you. But the question really is like, what was the key to y'all connection? Because I was looking for fatherly advice in the story of your relationship with your father.
You're making me tear up there, Michael. That was really beautiful and well said. Write that down at some point. I think you touched on something there, which is everything, and that's time. And there's something that needs to be learned about time. I say this, I'm not a father yet. My mom's pressuring me on that every single day. So, well, God willing, we'll be there soon enough. Okay. But what I notice with my dad, and I get this on, I get on my friends about this these days. There's a difference between just spending time and then it being real, honest, impactful time. So I have a friend, he's hanging out with his kids, but he's on his phone the entire time. And I said, look, I'm not going to teach you how to parent, but if you're on your phone the entire time, these kids are just running around. It's not like dad's there. Dad's there, but dad's there as much as a garbage can is. No, he's not present. He's just sort of standing there. And what my dad did, and I didn't appreciate this until I worked at NBC and I worked in the business, was you know how grueling it is. You know how long the hours are. You know how you're getting incoming from the outside. You're getting internal struggles that are coming at you, power struggles within a company. You're dealing with so many things just on top of the normal job, right? And despite all that, despite the success that he had, he always made sure that he would give me honest time. And that would talk about what was going on in my life at that day, talk about my friends, ask them how they were doing. He would sort of chart out, okay, what do you have on the horizon for tests or quizzes? Or what's the big sports game that you have that you might want to get that work done ahead of time so we can enjoy it, et cetera, et cetera. And I always felt like it was a person who really cared, that it wasn't just forced, and he knew when to pull back. He knew when to pry. And that was something that I'm just so grateful for all these years later, was that it was somebody who cared and cared honestly. And it's one of those things where it's hard to teach that, right? I think part of it's intuitive, but there is this element of, okay, when you're around your kids, like they're way smarter than you think they are. Like take a real interest in them and what their activities are and try to relate to them. And he always did that, and I'm forever grateful for it.
No, I appreciate that. It just added to just this ongoing evaluation of like, I'm doing good, but I could be better. There are areas that I could definitely be better in, and just your relationship with your father is so beautiful, and it's really nice to see you. You mentioned being at peace. You seem so free of any sort of burden or sense of a false obligation, if you will, like knowing that that's not what he would have wanted for you to carry a burden. He wouldn't want you to carry his memory from a place of peace and happiness, and not not anxiety. And so
and it's,
I'm really happy for you.
No, and to speak to that quickly, for many years I would struggle so much with the anniversary of his passing. I think a lot of us do that. And I actually had a friend of mine who said, that's going to be there forever and it's going to hurt. Celebrate the birthday. Celebrate the birthday. And then that brings back the joy in all those moments. And that was a little step along my journey that was so helpful. Yeah. And the birthday was a sort of, I was kind of sad, kind of happy. And then I started to embrace that as being happy around that. And we just had an event in Buffalo with 500 people.
I was going to ask.
Book on my dad's birthday.
You had the book signing.
It was so great. It was so great.
Yeah.
And it's just like things like that. We went back to my father's hometown of Buffalo. We went to this bar that my grandfather and him used to go to. 500 people came out. It was like a 3-hour line, but it was a celebration of the man. And it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, we're coming up on 15 years. That'll be a difficult day for me, but man, I'm going to live in this energy for as long as I can. And that's the key, I think, with loss, is you got to find those moments of peace and moments of happiness. And birthdays are a good place to start. I think some people get upset around the lost loved one's birthday. Turn that into a day of joy and remembrance. It really is a nice thing to do.
That was incredible. I saw that on your Instagram. Like, May 7th was your father's birthday in Buffalo. Correct, yeah. I just, what an amazing tribute, what an amazing moment to share with him. And not to be overshadowed, your mother, Maureen Orth, an accomplished and respected journalist in her own right, who another amazing part of the story is how you guys' relationship grew and developed and was tested and forged through this tragedy. But if I'm not mistaken, are you joining me from Oakland right now?
I'm in San Francisco right now. I'm right across the bay. So yeah, tonight I go to Oakland.
Tonight is
Yes.
How full circle is that? That's fantastic.
It's great. And, you know, my mom was, I always said, the best writer in the family. She writes for Vanity Fair. And what was interesting, when my father passed away, I think the relationship with the surviving parent always changes. And especially for young men who are very close to their fathers, you sort of try to assume that role of, okay, I'm the man of the house and I'm going to help out mom with, you know, how to pay bills, or, you know, different things that need to get done, the sort of logistics that we often see men do around the house a lot of the time. And I tried to do that, and it was with some success, but I never really knew who my mom was independent of being mom. And it wasn't until I traveled with her in my 30s, and, you know, I used to go one-on-one with dad all the time. We go to games, we go to spring training, we go to the Final Four. Like, we had all this bonding male time. But when I was with my mom, and I started to see, okay, here is a woman who, when she graduated college, she went to the Peace Corps because she didn't like the opportunities available for women at the time. It was basically be a nurse or be a teacher. She goes, no, I want adventure. So she joins the Peace Corps and builds schools in Colombia, right outside of Medellin, and really did that to measure herself up against the world. So when I see that in her, I realized the reason she was so hard on me growing up is that she wanted me to know that how the rest of the world lived, but also just how hard you have to grit and grind to get things done. And she would say, oh, your father spoils you too much. You're giving too much for your dad. Like, you got to go out there and earn more. And I was like, well, mom, I'm getting good grades. Like, I work summer jobs, like freight trucks. Like, dad's trying to teach me that. She goes, no, it has to be more. Very Catholic upbringing. You must always do more. And once I realized who she was as a human being, and that was sort of her origin story, it made our relationship way, way better, because I got her. I was like, oh,
yeah,
I now know why she was mad that my dad got me Jordans when I was 11 and I was the eighth man.
I love that story.
Right? It's like, you know,
that's
you don't
what
deserve
I would do.
that.
I'm the kind of dad where I will yell and scream and threaten. And then when I come home, I got a box of LaMelos for my son.
Yep.
And she's like, "You sending mixed messages." I was like, "But it's my love language. You know what I mean? What can I say? What can I say?" So I'll get you out of here on this, man.
Yeah.
I started off by asking where you were on your life's journey. Again, the title is "Look for Me There: Grieving My Father, Finding Myself." Are you still in the process of finding yourself? And if so, how's that going?
I think we're always a work in progress. I think, like I said before, I found that place of peace as it pertained to my father's death. So that was a big, big part of myself. As far as what I want to do, I like storytelling. I like being in that space. I don't know what it will look like in the next few months or a year. I'm going to take this book as far as it can go. The responses I've gotten are incredible. I'm still kind of learning. I respond to everybody, but I'm learning how to sort of take this in. I mean, I had one guy who was 78 years old who said, you know, I lost my father about 50 years ago, and reading this book, it's the first time I was able to process it. And that just, you get a note like that and it floors you, right? You're just, I thank you so much. So I think that's been sort of helping me out on my own path, is going, all right, this book had a lot of purpose behind it. And it was a really hard book to write. You know, it came about organically. It took about 4 years. There were really difficult periods of time where I think a lot of folks were like, are you all right there? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, no, I got this book. And people are like, oh, okay, all right. So there are always doubters around, even in your close friend group. But I was able to pull it off, and I'm just I'm basking in it for the moment. But I think storytelling is a good future for me.
It's a really good book. You're really good at it. I know you live by Luke 12:48, unto whom much is given, much is expected or required. And you're giving a lot back with this book. Again, I read it as a father, and obviously what you're doing for people who can relate to dealing with loss and grief is incredible. I lied. Speaking of pulling it off, Wait, I cannot get you out of. You got a whole Marshawn Lynch jersey hanging behind you. I
I do,
cannot get you
yeah.
out of here without talking about the Bills. Even though you grew up in DC, that's your father's hometown, it's your father's team, that is your team. You are a member of Bills Mafia, although I don't recall seeing you jump through a table. Have you done
Yeah.
that? Or have I just missed it?
It happened. It wasn't on tape, and I cheated
Okay.
because I went to my cousin because he was like, "You got to do this." It was a number of years ago, and I got one of those old church fair tables, and I made sure that it was already broken a little bit because I was like, "I cannot do it and then not fall through the table." Thankfully,
Yeah,
I
that
think
would
I'm big
hurt.
enough now that it would definitely work out. But it's amazing this how the national media has caught on to how special Buffalo is and the relationship the town has with the team. And it's going to be an exciting year. Here's my one, 2 cent prediction. I
I need to
actually
hear it.
don't think they win the division. I think Miami or the Jets win the division, but then I think they get in as a wild card without the pressure of
Okay.
trying to go wire to wire, and that actually helps them
Hmm.
out a lot. I think that
Maybe
if you look
playing
at
their
back at
best
last
ball
year,
late.
yeah, they'll play their best ball like they'll sneak in, kind of like those old Pittsburgh teams used to do. I just think if you look
Hmm.
back at last year, the stuff they dealt with the terrible racist mass shooting, it's about a year
Hmm.
anniversary of that, where they were very much involved in trying to help the community grieve and heal. And then they go into the season. The owner, Mrs. Pagula, has a terrible health scare, health event.
Yep.
They go in the year, and it's just they never really are able to settle because then they deal with 2 blizzards. And then the thing happens with Damar Hamlin where he almost passes.
Yeah.
And thank God, what a
Yeah.
beautiful story that was. But we forget about how emotionally devastating that was to go through for such a long period of
Yeah.
time. So I think if they had the opportunity to sort of play loose, don't have the pressure of expectation, let Aaron Rodgers get all the publicity in the AFC East, it'll be good for them.
So, I'm from New Orleans, and I piss off a lot of Saints fans when I say this. I'm not a Saints fan. I got a lot of respect for Buffalo fans because that's the type of stuff that would have made, like losing those Super Bowls, that would have made me quit. Or those types of, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. So, as a Saints fan, growing up, losing in the playoffs at home year after year, I was like, I'm done. I can't take this. My blood pressure too high, and I'm 13, 14 years old, right? So, fast forward though, I'm in Miami in 2010, in February of 2010, and Tracy Porter picks off Peyton Manning, and the Saints win the Super Bowl for the first time. Oh, and I cried like a baby because I thought of my grandfather, who was a pastor for 50 plus years in New Orleans, and I remember him getting us out of church as quickly as possible on Sundays so we can go get Popeyes and watch the Saints games. I remember trying to beat him to the newspaper to read the dispatches from La Crosse, Wisconsin, and training camp before he could every day at the Times-Picayune. And I just knew what the Saints winning the Super Bowl meant to that city, meant to the people that I loved and the people that I know in that city, just meant to that community, the people who have lived their whole lives waiting for that moment. So I cried, not just the little fan inside of me that I had buried, but I cried for that entire fan base and that, the city of New Orleans, and especially given what the city had been through just a few years earlier. Say all that to say, have you allowed yourself to dream and think about what you may feel and what it would mean to you, to what it would mean to your father, your family, Buffalo, if what you said come true and they get in as a wild card and take the long way and go on the road and win the Super Bowl, like what that would mean and how you would handle that?
So when I went and traveled around the world, I went to 6 continents and over 65 countries. And I promise you that I tried to leave a little bit of that energy in every single place I went to, whether it was flying by Mount Everest or Hindu temples or mosques, synagogues, cathedrals, etc. But I'll tell you 2 stories. Number one, I watch every Bills game. And I do because for those 3.5 hours, dad's alive again. It transports me back to the couch with the chicken wings, sitting there.
Yeah.
I can hear the laugh. I can hear the scream. I can hear the cursing. I can hear it all. And it's just a wonderful memory. I was dating a woman and she's like, I don't get, sports are silly. And I knew right away, like, yeah, it's not going to work. I'm just sorry. Like,
You're
aside
silly.
from they're not silly, you're silly. And then also, this is such an important thing for me. It's like I get to relive my moments with Dad. I have to have it. Second thing I'll tell you, I did the audio version of the book, which you very kindly brought up. And there's some very heavy stuff in the audio version for reading it out loud, right?
Definitely.
Compared to writing it. And I go through it, and I'm actually it goes pretty smoothly. I don't choke up at all. I don't get overcome with emotion. There's a few times where I get a little bit heavy, but for the most part, I'm cruising through it, and I'm going back to my TV tracking voice, and everything's going smoothly. The only time where we had to take multiple takes, where I just start bawling, is the last line of the book and the epilogue, which is that the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl and I'll be there. And yeah, exactly what you said, because I say those words and I think about just my grandfather and all the hard work and all his friends and the city and the community and my dad. And it's like, it's the affirmation of their life, right? And it sounds crazy to say that. And people who cheer for Dallas or New York and, these big cities, they don't get that to the same degree. But when you're a place like New Orleans, where that team and the community are one,
it's everything.
They're number one. It's everything. And you know what? I don't hate on Kansas City, because it's been great to see with Kansas City with that. It's similar, and they're prideful about it, and they should be. Like, there's just something about that small market ethos where it's you can't compare it to anything else. It's really a beautiful thing.
This has been a wonderful time. You've been so graceful with your time. Thank you for spending it with me. I know you've been all over the place, and I'm honored that you accepted this invitation.
Are you kidding?
The book is incredible.
I'm so happy to be here. It was an honor for me, and especially because I looked up to you as a young kid. So it's come full circle. It's so happy to sit side to side with you now. And you were very nice to the interns. I'll tell everybody that. You were very cool.
Yeah.
You say, go out and get me something, but you keep the change. And so that was the test we always had.
That's right. That's right.
Go get Michael's sandwich, but he's going to give you a 20 and you're going to have $8 left over. So good guy.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, man. I can't wait to see where you go, where this book goes. It's a New York Times bestseller for a reason. It is helpful in ways you can't imagine. I highly recommend reading it or listening to it, as I have. And all the best to you, Luke. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, my friend. Take care.
Let's talk again soon. Hey, let's talk when the Bills win this thing, all right? Go Bills.
I'll be up here crying for you. I love it. Go Bills.
All right, brother. Take care.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.